Dear friends, in this conference, we are going to read and comment chapter 18 of the book of Revelation, whose topic basically is this one. It is a great lamentation about Babylon. Babylon has fallen. Now, this chapter 18 does not, as such, describes Babylon's falling. For this, you may turn to chapter 11, verse 13, or also you may turn to the end of chapter 16 of Revelation. Chapter 18 is about, a lamentation about the fate of Babylon and her chastisement. So I first read this chapter 18. After this, I saw another angel coming down from heaven, having great authority, and the earth was made bright with his splendor. And he called out with a mighty voice, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. It has become a dwelling place of demons, a haunt of every false spirit, a haunt of every false and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk the wine of her impure passion. And the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth have grown, rich with the wealth of her wantonness." And I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues, for her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. Render to her as she herself has rendered. Repay her double for her deeds. Mix a double draught for her in the cup she mixed. As she glorified herself and played the wanton, so give her a like measure of torment and mourning. Since in her heart she says, a queen I sit, I am no widow, mourning I shall never see. So shall her plagues come in a single day, pestilence and mourning and famine. And she shall be burned with fire, for mighty is the Lord God who judges her. So let us stop here and observe the fact that the people of God is called to leave Babylon. Come out of her, my people, lest you take part in her sins, lest you share in her plagues. This reminds us of what God asked Lot to do in the book of Genesis. At the time, the Lord intended to punish Sodom and Gomorrah, two wicked cities. We know that the nephew of Abraham was living in Sodom. And so Abraham was very much concerned about his nephew Lot, and actually God sent angels to take Lot out of Sodom before the city would be destroyed by fire and sulfur. So you have, it's part of the background of this passage, the chastisement of Sodom in the background. Just as Lot, Abraham's nephew, was asked to leave Sodom before the city was punished, here the people of God is asked to leave Babylon. And this corresponds to what I said in the general introduction to these conferences. The book of Revelation speaks of a spiritual exodus. You have to leave Babylon in order to walk toward the heavenly Jerusalem. Starting point, Babylon. Final point, point of arrival, the heavenly Jerusalem. So it is not surprising here to see that call to leave Babylon. Let us go on. Verse 8, her plagues will come in a single day, pestilence and mourning and famine. When I commented chapter 6 of Revelation, especially the first 4 seals, I explained that the arrows shot by the second, the third, and the fourth horseman are most probably plagues, the plagues of war, famine, of pestilence, and they are shot at the inhabitants of the earth, that is basically the Babylonians. And here we see 3 of those plagues: pestilence, mourning, and famine. Verse 9, and the kings of the earth who committed fornication and were wanton with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning. They will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, Alas, alas, your great city, your mighty city, Babylon, in 1 hour has your judgment come. And the merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, jewels, and pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet, all kinds of scented wood, all articles of ivory, all articles of costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble, cinnamon, spice, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, and wheat, cattle, and sheep, horses, and chariots, and slaves, that is, human soul. An interesting list of items. If you count, you will see that there are 28 items. This is not left over to chance, it is symbolic. 28, that is 4 times 7, 4 symbolizing all the earth, and 7 fullness, completion. So basically, a list of 28 items in Revelation represents all the possible items, all the possible goods you may buy and sell on earth. Notice too that the list begins with the most precious items: gold, silver, jewels, pearls, then with goods which have less value, such as ivory, wood, bronze, iron. And notice too the end of the list: slaves and human souls. At the end of the list, you have slaves, human bodies. And that is very interesting and significant. First, it is an illustration of the fact that in antiquity, slaves had so little value. It also suggests that Babylon has become wealthy thanks to the use of slavery. And so all the profits Babylon earned in that trade with other kingdoms on the earth were wrong, they were wicked, they were immoral, because they were based on human traffic. They were based on human slavery. Now, let us also notice the sudden chastisement of Babylon. Alas, alas, your great city, your mighty city, Babylon, in 1 hour has your judgment come. We see several times in history that was the case of the Roman Empire, the fact that some civilization or some cities think that they are almost eternal, they will last forever. And here, Babylon has fallen in 1 hour. So very quick chastisement. And it is a definitive chastisement. I mean, Babylon shall not recover from this disaster. The city shall no longer be rebuilt. As far as the historical city of Babylon is concerned, Babylon was destroyed in 482 before Christ, and even though it was not immediately totally abandoned, it never recovered from this event. So that is quite suggestive. Let us go on, verse 14. The food for which your soul longed has gone from you, and all your delicacies and your splendor are lost to you, never to be found again. The merchants of these wares who gain wealth from her will stand far off in fear of her torment, weeping and mourning aloud. Alas, alas, for the great city that was clothed in fine linen, in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels and pearls. In 1 hour, all this wealth has been laid waste. And all shipmaster and seafaring men, sailors, and all whose trade is on the sea, stood far off and cried out as they saw the smoke of a burning. What city was like the great city? This reminds us of what we read in chapter 13. Who is like the beast? And here, what city was like Babylon? And Babylon was destroyed. And we shall see next chapter that the beast too shall be destroyed. And they threw dust on their heads as they wept and mourned, crying out, Alas, alas, for the great city, where all who had ships at sea grew rich by her wealth. In 1 hour she has been laid waste. Now, a strange lamentation indeed, because if we carefully look, we see that it is not a true compassion. Compassion would mean that you really feel, you deeply feel sorry for a terrible event that happened to one of your deep friends. Here, it is not true compassion. All those people, the merchants of the earth, the shipmasters, and so on, why do they weep? Why do they cry? Because they lost a great customer, a customer with whom they had become wealthy. Now that customer had disappeared, and say they can no longer make trade with Babylon. So they lost a customer. So this is very interesting indeed. It is a wrong compassion. Verse 20, rejoice over her, O heaven, O saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her. That the mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and threw it into the sea, saying, So shall Babylon, the great city, be thrown down with violence, and shall be found no more. And the sound of harpists and minstrels and flute players and trumpeters shall be heard in you no more. And the craftsman of any craft shall be found in you no more. And the sound of the millstone shall be heard in you no more. And the light of the lamp shall shine in you no more. And the voice of bridegroom and bride shall be heard in you no more. So basically, all the customary signs of human activity in a city. For the merchant were the great men of the earth, and all nations were deceived by your sorcery. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all who have been slain on earth. Now, I'd like to return to this chastisement of Babylon, this time comparing with the Old Testament. As usual, images are drawn from the Old Testament. And here, well, there are several passages, some of them being, for example, the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Think of the images of fire and sulfur. So Genesis chapter 19. Here I'd like to focus on one passage in the Old Testament, book of Jeremiah, chapter 50 and 51. Now I display on the screen a spreadsheet comparing Jeremiah 50, 51 and Revelation 18. It is easy to see the similarities and to understand that John has drawn images from Jeremiah in order to describe the chastisement of Babylon in the book of Revelation. So in both passages, Jeremiah 50, 51 and Revelation 18, you have the mention of the fall of Babylon. The people of God must come out of the city. Babylon is left inhabited, so there is no longer anyone living in the city. Babylon is repaid for her crimes. You have the image of the drunkenness of the nations, the mentions of God as powerful judge, the call to holiness, the fact that trade with Babylon just stops forever, the joy of God's people, the amazement of the nations, the judgment of God, and the city left as a place for wild animals. So again, we see the deep roots of the book of Revelation in the Old Testament. You may really keep this as one of the keys for right interpretation of Revelation. All images are drawn from the Old Testament. Before concluding this commentary on Revelation 18, I like to make several commentaries, several observations. First, Babylon's chastisement is God's response to the request, the cry of the martyrs of the fifth seal. Let us remember chapter 6, verse 9. When the Lamb opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who have been slain for the word of God and for the witness they had. They cried out with a loud voice, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long, because you bring forth justice and judge our blood on those who dwell upon the earth? Then they were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer, until the number of their fellow servants and their brethren should be complete, who were to be killed as themselves had been. So the martyrs of the fifth seals are asking, Lord, what are you waiting for to bring forth justice and judge all those wicked people who are killing your servants? And here we have God's response. And actually, the people of God is invited to rejoice for this chastisement, because it is the time for God's justice. Verse 20, rejoice over her, O heaven, O saints and apostles and prophets, for God has given judgment for you against her. So this is the first observation. This is the time for justice. A second observation, which I think is important, you may have noticed that, yes, the city is mentioned, Babylon, but there is no mention at all of the Babylonians. Where are they, the Babylonians? Are they all dead, crushed by this disaster, crushed by earthquakes, fire, sulfur, and so on? Notice that there is only the mention of the city's destruction, but no mention of the fate of the inhabitants of the earth, the Babylonians. What happened to them? That's, I think, something important. We shall see in chapter 19 what happens to the Babylonians. Well, actually, we were already given a glimpse over this toward the end of chapter 11. Remember the story of the two witnesses. Chapter 11, verse 13, after the death, resurrection, and ascension of the two witnesses. At that hour, there was a great earthquake, and the tenth of the city fell. The city in Revelation 11 is Babylon. A tenth of the city fell, 7,000 people were killed in the earthquake, and the rest were filled with awe and fear, and they glorified the God of heaven. And I explained, when I commented chapter 11, I explained that this should be interpreted as, in a favorable way, and that the fact that most of the Babylonians convert because they glorify the God of heaven. Not all of them, but at least the major portion of them. So next time when we turn to chapter 19, we shall begin to understand what happened to the Babylonians. I see you soon for the next conference.